Well, what do you think about what we just saw? I know you were just working UFC 274 with what happened between
Yeah.
Rose Namajunas and Carla Esparza, because that was, pretty controversial. And for Carla to walk away as a new strawweight champion, with not much happening during that fight. What was your takeaway from that?
Well, it was definitely frustrating to watch as a fan. Frustrating because and there's a parallel, I guess, to be drawn. I'm sure you felt this at times too. It's almost like there's more pressure on women to perform
Yep.
because there's fewer opportunities, there's more judgment. So it's you know,
Anyone that would be talking shit or thinking negatively was just given reason, which sucks.
that's my point. Yeah, exactly. Now, have there been crappy male fights? Absolutely. I mean, I think they were rattling them off during the broadcast. Francis
They
Ngannou
were.
versus Derek
They
Lewis
were.
certainly comes to mind
Hmm.
for me, and
Yeah.
it was on par with that. I don't think either of them is proud of it. In terms of the result, I think unfortunately what happens when you have that type of fight is you take away the most important scoring criteria, which is damage. There's an apex to the criteria that's used to score a round, and the top of the top of the top is damage. And so when you take away any form of damage, you start to look at the more lame things like octagon control and whatever. And
Sure.
so to I think that Carla did. Here's what I'll say. I think that when you watch the fight, you can see a probably better fighter in Rose Namajunas. She took Carla down with ease when she finally decided that she was going to.
I know.
She did a great job of defending Carla's takedowns, but Carla was tenacious in the moments that she was trying to be. So I do think that Rose is probably the more complete fighter, but Carla won on the judges' scorecards, and I think she won that fight rightfully so because
Yeah.
we don't score the fight as a whole. We score it round by round, and there is a criteria for how you score round. And I don't disagree with the way that it was scored. It just sucks.
It's interesting too. I mean, yeah, it does suck walking away from that and just sort of the aftermath
And I feel bad for
of.
Carla.
I feel
I
bad
feel
for
bad for both of
everybody. Like,
them.
it sucks. Yeah, it
Yeah.
does. It sucks. I mean, to have the crowd booing and now it's kind of left as like a now what? Now what for Rose? Where's she gonna
Yeah.
go from here? I mean, at least Carla's going to get married and her face didn't get destroyed. So she's
I know
got
that was a good
that going
takeaway.
for
That was a
her.
good
I
takeaway.
know. But something that you said that I find interesting, and I think this definitely applies to female broadcasters as well, is, if you're working with, a male, or there's other men in broadcasting that maybe get a fact wrong or mispronounce somebody's name
Yep.
or something like that. It's like, nobody gives a shit.
No.
If I were to do it or you were to do it, we would be burned. Oh
Yeah.
my God, would the internet ever explode? There is that pressure on women. I mean, and really in any spotlight to be perfect. You cannot waver. You cannot have the errors because we're just judged in a far different way. Have you felt that as a
Oh
broadcaster?
yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, and probably even more so even more so in the situation that I'm trying to put myself in, right? So as you know, in broadcasting there are certain lanes. There's the host lane, the reporter lane, the play-by-play lane, and those people are tend to be the more seasoned true broadcasters. And then you have the analysts and the color commentators who tend to come up through the sport and are the ones with the hands-on knowledge.
Mhm.
And what's difficult about what I'm trying to do and what I'm doing, thank goodness, successfully, is jump lanes. And it's never been done before in MMA, where you've had a reporter that's like, no, no, all of a sudden I'm worthy of having an opinion and you should listen.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
so yeah, there's a lot of pressure when I'm calling fights on the Contender Series next to Daniel Cormier, and he has this inherent, as he has earned, inherent credibility because you can go on the internet and see his fights, and we've seen the belts around his waist. And then
Yeah.
there's me, who does not have the inherent credibility. So that the credibility, I've had to scrape and claw for every iota of it that I have been able to garner so far. And that's probably the toughest part of it, is knowing that one little slip up takes a huge chunk out of that. And I did it once in an LFA fight. And it is frustrating because I can't tell you, like, I'll watch the broadcast and someone will call an anaconda a darce or a darce an anaconda. And I'm like, oh, that's not what that is. But no one, it's just a mistake. And we all make mistakes. And we all know we make mistakes. But I can assure you that if Laura Sanko on her first UFC broadcast confuses an anaconda for a darce, I'm going to feed into every stereotype that I hear about myself on the internet, all the time.
God, the pressures are real, man. It's crazy. I mean, I always tried not to think about those things when I was going out and broadcasting. And, I think there's definitely a gift to the art of being able to laugh at yourself or be like, oh, whoops, I meant blah, 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 whatever. Or honestly, even having a broadcast partner that knows you well enough and trusts the situation well enough to even point stuff like that out so that you can have a conversation about it instead of glossing over and being like, oh my God, there was this glaring error and we're just moving past it, to like try not to make you feel bad or to not draw more attention to it. Where like sometimes I would prefer to just be like, can we just talk about the weird thing that just happened and we'll just fix it and we'll move on from that. Sure. But yeah, I know those pressures can just be so insane.
What's interesting to me, their perception from the fan base is like, it's really hard. It's such a weird, I'm sure you got this too. It's such a weird catch-22. It's like, on one hand, there's pressure to look a certain way. And on the other hand, if you do look a certain way, there's no possible way that you could know what you're talking about.
Yeah. What a double-edged sword that is, huh?
It's very, very strange. And I love to remind like the fans that are like, well, she had, whatever she had, like 6 amateur fights and 1 pro fight. Like, what the does she know? And I want to be like, well, that is 6 more fights than Greg Jackson had. And that is 6 more fights than Eric Nixick had. And are you going to question those coaches on what they know about MMA? Like, the fans forget that there are actually a host of experts, and they are real experts within the MMA world, that haven't fought once.
That's like, I mean, shit, look at Stephen A. Smith. I don't even know what that dude makes, but it is like a lot of cash. And, he gets paid to have his opinions, to be his personality and all of those things. But for women, it is just, it is really hard to come by and hard to kind of, it's just a rough thing to try to navigate. But I think once you're in there, I mean, I think you do a awesome, beautiful job with what you do. And so when you were moving from being a fighter into broadcasting, how did that come about? Was that something that you wanted to do, or did somebody else kind of say, hey, you're a good speaker, do you want to try this?
Yeah, no, it just kind of happened. I was in camp for my next fight and I ended up getting pregnant. And so when I told Invicta, I was like, hey, can't do this fight, so sorry. I was obviously going to be on the shelf for a little while. And Shannon Knapp, who owned Invicta at the time, called me up and she said, hey, what would you think about doing an interview? We don't really have someone that does that on the team. And we've got Marloes coming in town and she's a legend. And we want to do like a sideline little piece with her. And I said, yeah, I mean, I can do that. But like, I've never held a microphone before. I've never interviewed someone before. I've never even looked at a camera before. So sure, I can try it. But yeah, that was the beginning. And then they kind of moved me into doing the post-fight interviews live, which that's a crazy jump when you think about it, because I didn't have I had no training on how to do it. What the right format is, where you stand, like how you keep them from moving around, and like,
oh my God, that can be rough. Just stay on your spot. Stop moving around.
All of the little things that I really had to learn on the fly on live television, which makes for some really interesting clips, I'm sure, that people can find on Fight Pass.
Yeah, though that being said, I think there's also something like I'm really not a believer in broadcast school. I never went to it. I just kind of cut my teeth figuring out what works and what didn't work. Granted, I got to do this on a much smaller scale and continue to kind of grow as I went, thank God. But yeah, I mean, sometimes you see people that come out of a broadcasting school and they want to be so smooth and so polished and all of those really professional things that do make a broadcaster a great broadcaster. But I think in terms of fans being able to connect to you and they're like, oh, you're a person doing this thing and I like you and I can see who you are. You're not hiding behind all of these skills that you've honed while you're in college or whatever. So yeah, I think being able to kind of jump in there and figure it out, it's kind of almost like, I always think it's better.
I
That's
mean,
what I like to
I
see.
wouldn't do it any other way. And
Yeah.
I think that maybe that's the one thing I've really been able to communicate as I've, navigated all of these many different jobs I do for the UFC and for other organizations, is just at the end of the day, I feel like the fans can tell that I'm a real fan, like a real
Yes.
fan.
Yep.
I didn't I didn't go to school and then fall in love with MMA. Like I've been here, I've been you guys, I've been the fan,
Yeah.
and I've just sort of worked myself into this position. So kind of the same way I think the special sauce that Joe Rogan brings to the broadcast is, I mean, yeah, he's smooth and he's personable, but really at the end of the day, it's like he's just so infectious in terms of how much he loves the sport and the moments in the sport, and obviously knows his stuff as well. So
Has he given you any little nuggets of wisdom along the way?
yeah, he's he's an interesting guy because he's such a huge star now that a lot like Dana, he kind of just like zooms in the building, does his thing, and then
I've
zooms right out.
wondered that. It's funny. I saw Megan O'Leary had posted a picture with like her and the whole gang from
Yeah.
274. And I was like, yeah, I wonder like, is Rogan just there like hanging out with the guys like cage side before the event starts and going over their notes
For
or
a
like,
few minutes, but I think it's relatively quick. But I had a
yeah.
really nice conversation with Joe last summer. And, to be honest, I wasn't really sure if he even really knew who I guess maybe I thought he would kind of know who I was, but we had never really had a long interaction before, just interactions in passing. And just so happened that we kind of got stuck behind stage waiting for Connor to make it to the weigh-ins, and had a really nice conversation. And man, it meant a lot. He's like, I didn't realize he knew what I was trying to do to be, to be the first female color commentator. And there's always a little trepidation because it's like, there's part of me that is in my head wondering, like, is he sitting there thinking, oh, darling, you think you can do what I do? That's adorable. Like the insecure part of me assumes that that's what he's thinking, but that wasn't it at all. And he was incredibly gracious. And he said, listen, there's gonna be a lot of people that tell you that you can't do it. But he's like, I didn't have any fights and look at me.
Yeah.
So he said, you're killing it. And he said, I hope we get to call fights together one day. So it meant a lot.